Happy Sunday, everybody. I'm a couple minutes early, but I figure that's all right. Going to be doing chapter 3 today. Um, I haven't been overly active as far as social media stuff goes lately, just so much other stuff going on. I was requested to do something that I take as a great honor today, so I'll be doing that pretty soon. I've got a project going on with Order of the Trident 1, in addition to this. Book 2 is finished. It's going through editing right now, and then it will be, we're going to release it at VisionCon, so I hope to see you guys there, and hopefully you'll be able to get a copy at that point in time. I would like to ask you guys if you would take a few minutes to get on Amazon and review the Order of the Trident. Whether you've read it or not, reviews help. With the way the algorithms are going, need about 50 of them, and that would be the amount that Amazon requires for them to start promoting it themselves. So things can start to get off the ground. That way, we'll have the best possible launch when Book 2 comes out. But anyway, you guys do that. Thank you. It's been a pain in the ass, if you can imagine. I suppose I will go ahead and start this, and due to the type of chapter this is, I am going to wear this nice little pirate hat that I got from Long John Silver's a long time ago. Alright, Order of the Trident, Chapter 3, The First Drewslayer. Constellations change time and again over the centuries. Some stars burn out, while others ignited for their first time. Despite their age and placement, this evening they looked down through the massive cloud cover over the Rienar Sea. Her waters boiled and churned, rushing over everything within sight. Of the tiny specks of light lost in the water's surface, one in particular remained visible. The ship rocked violently, with each wave crashing into the hull. The unending cascade of motion sent the men on board racing to secure the lines. The sails jerked and fluttered, catching the massive twisting winds. Gareth's muscles flexed, straining against the wheel. He couldn't fathom how a single rudder could present so much resistance. Bracing himself for the approaching wall of water, he felt the mist speckle against his exposed flesh before collision. The wave hit with a crash, knocking his feet from beneath him. He pulled against the spokes locked firmly in his hands. Getting back to his feet, he looked at the crew below. He couldn't afford to be thrown overboard. Not only would it result in his death, but the lives of his crew hung in the balance. The heavy droplets of rain stung when they hit him, like thousands of needles stabbing into his face. They pulled together and dripped from his bald head. His thick red beard was drenched, streaming the salty liquid into his already soaked tunic. The white linen clung to him, with the moisture exposing the matted hair on his chest. With moments to spare before the next wave would hit, the grizzled captain surveyed the deck, hoping the storm hadn't claimed too much. Their entire haul had been washed away, making the trip altogether a waste. Much of his crew were missing, most likely swept over the side, leaving their jobs to be filled by the remaining men. The gale winds blowing in each and every direction made it difficult to keep the sails taut. There's no way to rescue them. They're at Corin's mercy. Half lost in thought of his men, he fought the shifting currents, hoping the decision would save their life. Would save the rest. All hands on deck. Drop the sails. We're more likely to break a mast than we are to get anywhere in this wind. His voice bellowed out over the howling sea and hammering winds. Everyone else, grab an oar and start rowing. The exhausted captain steered the fishing vessel directly into the waves. The ride was much rougher, but there was less chance of keel over. He looked through the dark rolling clouds to the tiny flickers of light beyond. He couldn't be certain without a clear view, but the port should be no more than a few days out in dry conditions. The storm would delay them greatly. The ship started to gain speed, but the constant change in direction stifled their progress. The great currents made the wheel difficult to hold steady, along with the wind pushing them off course. He glanced down at the compass, watching the lubber's line. Correcting direction, he searched the horizon for any sign of familiarity. The last thing he needed was to run aground, provided he could keep her afloat long enough to make port. Without warning, the wind picked up, nearly knocking him from his feet. For several minutes it blew harder than ever before. Then, as quickly as the maelstrom arrived, it was gone. The choppy waters calmed, leaving the ship to float gently across the diminishing waves. The dark gray sky began to clear, allowing the rising sun to burn through the clouds. The beams reflected off the shimmering water, illuminating the lone vessel gliding gracefully over the top of the glassy sheen. Relief washed over him. Checking the horizon, he tied off the wheel to keep her sailing straight. Making his way from the helm to the upper deck, he overlooked the crew still rowing in unison. "Captain on deck!" the first mate shouted, notifying the crew of his presence. They locked the oars into position and jumped from the small wooden benches lining both sides of the deck. Awaiting his command, they looked up, clearly relieved to be out of the storm. He surveyed the deck, saddened by how empty it was. Nearly a month's worth was lost in a few hours. The crew was nearly half what it had been the day before, and the ship was battered, but she was whole. That was more than he could ask for. "Joseph, take 2 men and survey the ship. I want a list of everything lost, including sailors. We're not far from port. I'd like to be able to notify their widows when we arrive." He watched the 3 men jump up from their stations and rush below deck. "The rest of you, raise the sails and stow the ship. We've lost too much to delay any longer. Helmsman, get up here and take the wheel. I'm going to find out exactly how far off course we are." "Aye, Captain," they sounded in unison, watching him turn from the balcony. They scurried off to batten down everything lost in the storm. With purpose, he marched across the upper deck and stepped into his quarters. Stripping off his wet clothes, he tossed them into a barrel and grabbed a fresh set. Drying himself, he quickly dressed and grabbed a round leather case lying on the floor near his desk. The room was trashed. Nothing was where it belonged, thrown from its assigned place during the night. At least it was still on board, unlike much of his crew. Forcing the sorrows down, he unbuckled the straps and pulled the cap off the end of the deep brown case. Removing the parchment within, he unrolled it, exposing a large map. Tacking the corners down, he went to work discerning their exact location. Night had fallen on the vast ocean, calm and peaceful with the graceful sounds of water slapping against the bow. The large vessel slid across the surface like a hot knife into butter. The gentle breeze held the sails taut. Only the occasional flap could be heard when the winds changed direction. "Land ho!" The watch shouted from the crow's nest, signaling east. The signal fire was little more than a speck on the horizon, flickering in the distance. The sun was just beginning to crest, making the glowing flame all but disappear in its glow. He stood at the helm, his arms folded across his body, watching the helmsman steer the ship ever closer to home. Even from this distance, the sight was unnerving. Something's wrong. This is the largest port city in at least a month in each direction. I've never seen it fewer than 20 ships docked. Reaching the leather holster on his hip, he removed the sight glass. With a quick flip of his wrist, he extended, bringing it up. It extended. Bringing it up, he scanned the port. After a storm like that, this place should be packed. Why is it so bare? He thought aloud, unintentionally giving it voice. The thought sent a chill down his spine. "I don't have the answers any more than those you're already thinking, Captain." He smiled at the man. He was blunt with his answers, but he was always painfully honest. "Well put, Malachi." He watched the harbor draw ever closer, timing their descent with the wooden post, marking each side of the port entrance. He bellowed out, "Drop the sails! Ready to make port, starboard side!" The sails fell with a crash, removing the steady thrust. With clipped wings, she drifted forward, carried by her momentum. Malachi cranked the wheel, steering her into bay. She groaned with the sharp turn, sliding sideways toward the dock. With a gentle bump, she rocked against the buoys, coming to a stop. The harbor master stood on the wooden planks watching the ship roll in. With a quick glance, he looked at his feet, measuring the distance from the water. His two assistants stood near the edge, waiting to catch the moorings. A soft, subtle smile breached his lips. A heavy splash erupted between the hole and the dock, soaking the lads. He grinned contemptibly at the waterline just ahead of his feet, a gentle reminder of what it was like to be inexperienced. "First mate, see the ship secured. I'm going to have a chat with the master." The captain waited for the gangway to be positioned before he stepped off. He took in the sight of the elderly man in his fine tunic and embossed felt vest. With age alone, he was ready to relinquish his duties to someone younger, but he retained a good sense of spirit, something many his age had lacked for years. "Captain Gareth Averon, I'm glad to see you made it through that strange storm." He placed his hands on his waistline, limiting himself. With a slight bow, he reached as far as his arms would allow him and pushed himself back up. "Master Merrick, why is the port so bare? Has something happened?" The old man dropped his cheerful guise. Looking to his assistants, busy tying off the lines, he hesitated before speaking. We were attacked. They came out of nowhere from every direction, like a swarm of darkness in the middle of the night." He shifted uneasily, searching for anything to change the subject. Darting around, he found the young captain's eyes, forcing him to continue. "The guards were taken completely by surprise. It didn't take any time at all before they'd overrun the whole town. Several people were captured. We don't know how many were killed. Most of the boats set sail last night to restock supplies that were stolen. That and for fear of them returning." Gareth hung on each word, intently listening for anything substantial. "And my family? Do you know anything of them?" His voice cracked with fear. "I'm sorry, sir. We've been too busy repairing the damage. We haven't been able to gather an accurate count of survivors. All I can say is I haven't seen." Without pause, Gareth turned, breaking into a full sprint towards his home atop the hill. The light brown siding was broken in places, revealing the wooden beams beneath. Several articles of clothing, broken candlesticks, and other common items were strung along the ground as if they'd been grabbed without thought and abandoned in the dirt. He reached the door, finding the frame busted, leaving the two-story home open for all to see. He stepped in, spotting the broken pieces of door and frame scattered along the polished plank floor. The common room was trashed. Lanterns had been knocked from their hooks, lying broken on the floor. Scorch marks scored the wood where the oil had burnt. He was surprised the whole place hadn't gone up in flames. The candles had burned out, leaving long wax trails hanging from their fixtures. The table was overturned, its ornaments scattered throughout the room. He drew his cutlass and slowly walked inside, looking for any sign of his family. Reaching the nursery, he peeked through the cracked door. The room was silent, save for his weight under the occasional loose floorboard. He pushed the door open, finding the cradle overturned. His heart pumped faster and faster, sending fear down his spine. Lying on the floor near the spilled blankets, he noticed a torn piece of his wife's favorite dress bunched up. A small amount of blood had dried next to it, not enough to suggest death, but certainly injury. A pain stabbed through his heart. Snatching up the light blue fabric, he clenched his fist around it. Closing his eyes, he felt a rage he'd never known before build inside him. Overflowing with pain, a single thought echoed in his mind. The scent of the fabric filled his nostrils with memory of his wife. A hatred burned inside him, fueling his desire for revenge. It didn't matter if they simply scratched her. They caused her pain, and that was enough to evoke his wrath. Tucking the ribbon into his sash, he opened his eyes and stormed upstairs. Without slowing, he lifted his leg and kicked the sturdy door, sending it off its hinges. It flew across the room, shedding bits of the wooden frame. He opened the wardrobe and looked inside, finding his quarry. He snatched the gray leather armor from its wire stand and slipped it overhead. With a quick tug, he tightened the pull cords along the sides and tied them off to prevent it loosening. He recalled wearing it only once, the day he was named captain. His captain's words echoed in his mind. Every good captain needs a suit of armor. You never know when you're going to you never know what life's going to throw at you. One day you'll be sailing the seas, the next you have to sail your boat and take up arms. It's always handy to have a good set of armor. Forcing the memories back, he pulled the hem down, hoping the shoulders would abandon their training and form to his present shape. As he ran his hands across the brigandine, the numerous studs lining both sides scraped his fingers. The once shiny metal circlets were now dull and slightly corroded from years in storage. Brushing them one last time, he adjusted the straps, making sure he could move properly. Opening the wardrobe drawer, he removed a thick leather belt and strung his sheath and pouch on it. He threw it around himself, catching the tail. Looping it around the buckle, he tied a hinge knot and let the tail drop down between his legs. Adjusting his gear, he sheathed the blade and set off for the docks. Resting in his high-back oaken chair, the harbor master glanced out the side window of the dockhouse. Fear crept into him with the sight of the armored captain. The man had a look about him demanding attention and more so, caution. Pushing himself up with the polished armrest, he grabbed his staff and made for the door to meet the clearly enraged man. Stepping out the door, he silently prayed to Quarren, hoping the encounter would pass easily. Let's see here. He paused at the edge of the dock, awaiting the man's approach. He had a look about him that would frighten the common man. Something in his eyes told him to run, but he couldn't. It was his job to interact with the captains. Besides, that primal rage Gareth emanated wasn't a guarantee he wouldn't give chase. Merrick, what'd the creatures look like? Gareth demanded, dropping all formalities. The old man was shaken by his demeanor. He tried to speak the words, but they wouldn't leave his mouth. Cap. Abandoning all tact, he shouted louder than intended. What'd they look like? He could feel the anger rising. I didn't get a good look, sir. They were hard to see, like they were always standing in shadows. You might ask Adrian Blakener over at the bakery. He barely got away from him last night. If anyone got a good look, it'd be him. It wasn't much of a lead, but it was better than nothing. Gareth turned and briskly strode towards the bakery. He passed several boarded-up shops. The few citizens he passed along the way gave him wide berth. Finding the small shop on the east side of town, he glanced at the charred siding. It seemed the place had caught fire at some point. The storm more than likely had put it out, or had some hand in putting it out. With little care for the people nearby, he bust through the door, demanding answers. Adrian, I need to know what the creatures look like. The boy behind the counter was barely old enough to run the shop. He jumped at the loud bang, backing away from the large man barreling toward him. Lost in purpose, Gareth grabbed hold of his tunic and pulled him over the counter. I need to know what the creatures looked like. The young man began to speak, but was so frightened he couldn't get the words out. Slamming him into the wall, he hoped to jar the boy's memory. He had no time to wait for answers. Pinning him in place, he dropped a hand and slapped him across the cheek, more alerting him than causing pain. Speak! I saw them. Gareth heard a trickle of liquid hit the floor. Glaring into the shopkeeper's eyes, he spoke in a low, quiet tone. What'd they look like, boy? He shook uncontrollably, choking on his words. They were black. Their skin was black. Some of them had long hair. Others had short. They had magic. They could disappear in the darkness, like hide inside it. They used the night to get close and then attack. They would appear, and he started crying, uncaring that he'd wet himself. They took my mother, he sobbed, letting the tears roll freely down his cheeks. Gareth shook him, attempting to regain his attention. What kind of weapons did they have? The young man looked puzzled at the question, staring out into the anger-filled eyes. They had all kinds of weapons, mostly swords, but there were others. How many of them were there? He began to sob again. There were hundreds of them. They came out of nowhere, took what they wanted, and disappeared as quickly as they arrived. Please, that's all I know, he begged, sobbing uncontrollably. Gareth released him, letting him fall to the floor. Without a word, he turned and stormed from the bakery. Ah, damn it. Alright, we will continue next week with Chapter 4. Hopefully we'll have a few more people to watch it. This is the one that I broadcasted talked about more than any others. Tried to get higher numbers, and we had the least amount of views on this one, so hopefully it'll pick up. If not, I'll continue to do it. So I guess we will see you guys next time. Have a good Sunday and good luck in this coming week.